There it is. Move
Yep.
it down so you can see the top. Okay, a little more. We want the
Okay.
name. A little more. There it is. The scale of personal influence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me tell you what I mean by this. Let's say some guy hits you over the head with a club. He's
Mm-hmm.
influencing you. He's giving you a headache and a lump on the head. See? That's
Yeah.
influence. But that's not what I mean by personal influence. Personal influence is what the person does routinely to other people around him.
Mm-hmm.
So a person who attacks you, that's not personal influence. That's violent influence.
Yeah.
Well, but everybody is at some level on every scale. So everybody uses one of these 7 methods. It's not necessarily the same all the time. In other words, it can move. So this is a linear scale, as was the last one. Just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a quantum scale, meaning there's nothing in between. You know, if you're at level 3, you're not going to go to 3.1, 3.2, 3.3.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a gradual scale. You are either at level 2 or low. And so if a person changes, which does happen, he jumps. So you'll have a guy who's at level 3, level 3, level 3. Something wonderful happens to him. He shows up. He's at level 2. So when you change level on a quantum scale, you might say that that change occurs in a billionth of a second.
Mm-hmm.
There's no gradation. Okay, so now let's go to the direction. See where it has direction, it has plus, minus, plus, minus, plus. Again, inflow, outflow, inflow, outflow. So telepathy is an outflow. Charisma
So
is an
plus means outflow?
outflow, or you could call it reach. See,
Reach.
and when a person uses telepathy, he's reaching you with his
he's
telepathy.
reaching, yeah.
Whereas charisma is an inflow. They're
Mm-hmm.
not reaching you. You're reaching them. So like somebody like Jack Kennedy was conspicuously charismatic. You could see it, you know, and he had this magnetic thing where people followed him.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to follow. That's charisma. And then you go down to 3, reason. Well, reason is an outflow. See, when you reach somebody with your reason, you say, "Now, Your Honor, this is what my client did, and here's why he should not be sanctioned." He's reasoning. It's an outflow. Then below that is aloofness. Well, that's easy
Mm-hmm.
to see. Aloofness is an inflow or a withdrawal. A person who is aloof is withdrawn. Then below that is domination. That's an outflow. You know, when you get somebody like Hitler, domination. See, like when
Right.
he would get up in front of the crowd and he would deliver this harangue to the people, you know?
Yeah, with his speeches, his charisma, right?
Well, yeah, that's domination.
Mm-hmm.
He dominated people. So if you study the man and you see, you know, the people around him, he dominated. That's what he did. That's how he influenced
Yeah,
people.
right.
Okay. So people were afraid of him with good reason. And below that is victimization. Now, victimization is an inflow.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, if you're saying, "Oh, poor me, terrible things have been done to me, I am a victim," that's a withdrawal. You're being withdrawn. You're not reaching. You're just sort of retreating into your victimhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then 7, martyrdom. Martyrdom is an outflow. Because when you use martyrdom, you are reaching out with to people with this martyrdom that you
Mm-hmm.
use. That is what Jesus did. Jesus had a huge influence on the Western
Yep.
world by his martyrdom. It was an outflow. So now let's talk about the 7 levels. Let's start at the bottom. Martyrdom. Martyrdom is humility. Right? A person who is martyred is humble. You can see this in Jesus and the saints. St. Paul, St. Peter, they were all crucified by the Romans. They were very humble. You know, they didn't try to get out of it. They didn't argue. They just said, yes, I believe, and they influenced the world by their martyrdom. Because when people see that, it has an impact. I mean, Jack Kennedy became more beloved by being killed than he was by being alive.
Yeah.
He's almost like a saint. I'm not saying he's a saint, but almost, it's like people, that's sort of the effect it has, that he was martyred. I'm not saying he was at that level. He wasn't. He was at level 2. But
Mhm.
anyway, that's what martyrdom is. It's an outflow, and it's a outflow of humility.
Yeah.
Up from that is, see, if you have a guy who's put to death and he's saying, no, don't kill me, I didn't do it. That's not martyrdom. That's just a regular guy who doesn't want to get killed.
Yeah.
Up from that is victimization. Now, victimization is a guilt trip. This is more prevalent in the United States now than it ever was before. It's
Mhm.
very popular now to say, oh, poor me, I can't make as much money as my husband because I'm a woman. Or I'm oppressed by the police because I'm black. Or I can't get into a certain school because I'm Asian. I don't know if you know that, but the colleges have been discriminating against Asians, keeping them out of their schools because they didn't want to have so many. The Asians would come in and, like, of the top 10% of the SATs, 9 out of 10 of them would be Asians. So they had to set separate levels. Otherwise, they'd be taken over by Asians. But so now you have Asians going around saying, oh, we're being victims. Now, I'm not saying that they're not victims. They are. There are actual real victims in the world. The difference is they use it to influence people.
Yeah.
This is really big now with women. There's a big thing with, again, I don't know if you know this, but 47% of American men are not married. That is much higher than it used to be. And 63% of men under 30 are single. And that has to do with the way women are treating them. Women have been running this guilt trip on men. We are oppressed. Now, it is true that men are more violent than women, and so women are the ones who get beat up. You don't see women beating up men very often. So, yes, they're victims. But the question is, do you use it as a guilt trip? In other words, you are oppressing the person by making him guilty. So there's a lot of women going around saying, men are bad. Well, why is that? Well, a lot of men get drunk and beat their wives. Well, of course, that's true. But that doesn't, the other 95% of the guys didn't do that.
Exactly.
But,
Yeah.
but they're still running the guilt trip on them, you see? So it's a way of getting what they want. So, yes, there are victims, but using it against somebody, in other words, you withdraw into your victimhood and say, poor me, I can't get ahead. I can't get a job because I'm a victim. That's manipulation. Now, of course, there are people who have that happen to them, but in the United States, that isn't what went on. Very,
Yeah.
very, very few people did that. Some of them really were victims, but they didn't make a thing about it. They just dealt with it. Up from that is domination.
Mhm.
And of course, the most obvious example of this is Adolf Hitler. Now, domination is the same thing as overwhelm. They're overwhelming you. They get you to do things by domination. So sometimes you'll have a wife who dominates the husband. She overwhelms him. She yells at him. She insults him. She belittles him. And by doing so, she gets him to do what she wants.
Right.
So the husband says, honey, I'm going to go play golf tomorrow on Saturday. She says, no, you're not. Oh, no. I don't care if you work 5 days a week. You're not going to play. You're going to stay here and you're going to help me with the house. See, that's domination. She's overwhelming him. And it
Yep.
goes the other way, too. So I'm not saying it's just one way, but there's lots of people who do this. They dominate people. And when you see in literature, it's pretty obvious there are people who are dominating other people, as well as in the real world. A famous example of this in America is Lyndon Baines Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
who was president, took over from Kennedy. Boy, was he dominating. And in fact, they even had a word for this. They called it, "You're getting the LBJ treatment." He would get guys in who were in the Congress or whatever, and he would threaten them and yell at them and insult them to get them to do what he wanted them to do. He would overwhelm them, and they would be afraid of him. So you see, that's a big outflow. He was
Yeah.
outflowing domination. So then up from that is aloofness. Now, this happens more with women than with men.
Okay.
And in fact, it used to happen more than it does now. If you go back to Victorian times, if you study Victorian literature, you'll see that the women were very aloof. They were covered up from their toes to their necks. And, they would not speak out of turn, so this is like the woman who would drop a handkerchief and the man would pick it up and give it to her. See, that's like an aloof way of getting the man to pay attention to her. That's as far as they would go. So aloofness is restraint. I actually knew somebody like this. When I was in college, there was this woman I knew. I don't think I ever learned her name. She was so aloof, I wouldn't even ask her name. But it was like conspicuously aloof. It's like she was so gorgeous. I'm sure she was tired of every guy she met trying to hit on her. I'm sure that happened because she was like as beautiful as any beauty queen. So she just was aloof. And so big withdrawal. It's like when you walk by her, it was almost like a vacuum cleaner that pulled you in, Big, big aloofness. So, but there's some men who are like that too. A lot of people say that Ronald Reagan was aloof, and there's a lot of truth to that. I'm not pegging him at this level, but he certainly was. There was a lot about Ronald Reagan where he was restrained. He was like the opposite of Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was definitely not restrained.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not aloof. Whatever else you want to say about him, he's not aloof. See, he's not restrained. He comes out with it. Then above from that is reason. Now,
Reason.
this is the lawyer. This is what a lawyer gets paid for. He goes into the court and he uses reason. He files a paper that explains his position, and then he argues to the jury and my client should not be convicted because of this and that. And he gives them a reason. He gives them logic. And the lawyer who has the better logic usually wins. So if you have a really smart lawyer who knows how to do this well, he can get off people who are actually guilty. And the most obvious example of this is O.J. Simpson. When O.J. Simpson was arrested for murdering his wife and her friend, I said to my friends, they will never convict this guy because he was a multimillionaire. He got the 6 best defense lawyers in the United States. He paid them $500,000 apiece. Now, remember, this is 40 years ago. That was a lot of money back then.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
And they got him off. So that's reason. But anytime, like a math teacher, how does a math teacher explain to you how to use this function, how to resolve this equation? It's all reason. It's all logic. It's an outflow. He's reaching you with logic. Above that is charisma, which is leadership. Most people don't know. Charisma is a leadership quality. Elvis Presley was conspicuously charismatic. If you just go back and look at video of him, boy, was he charismatic. It was like a miracle. When he was 18 and before he was a recording star, he was going around in the South. He didn't even have a drummer. He had a guitarist and a stand-up bass, and he played acoustic guitar. And the women would just go nuts over him. And, his guitar player said, these women really love you. And so, and you can see it later on in his career when, like they'd introduce him, he'd walk on stage and say, wow, this guy's got something. So it's leadership. It's like a big magnetic pull that
Yeah.
person has. Only certain people have it. And above that is telepathy. Telepathy is will. In other words, you do not have to do anything in the physical plane to get your way. It's telepathic. Now, the most obvious example of this in a movie is in the original Star Wars movie.
Mhm.
So you have Luke in the speeder with the two droids that the Empire is looking for. And also there's Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's a Jedi who has telepathic ability. So when they come to the city, the Jedi says under his voice, "These are," and the sergeant of the guard says, "These are not the droids we're looking for. Let them go through." And then he explains, people with weak minds can be controlled. So the truth is that, everybody has the potential for telepathy. It's just how much do you know that you have it? And then if you have it, can you control it? So, but you
Yeah.
have to understand what telepathy is. It's will. So you get something by will. So you could actually there are guys who are very good with women. They will put the thought into this woman's head, I'm going to date this guy. And she does. She probably doesn't even know why.
Mhm.
But he impresses his will on her telepathically. And it goes the other way around too. Women do it to men too. The guy, he's not even looking for a girlfriend. In fact, he may even be married. But he meets this woman and it's like this will. Ah, yes, I'm going to be with this woman, and he does things he wouldn't even normally do because of telepathy. So the last thing is the axis. What is the axis? The dotted vertical line. This is
Mhm.
a scale of cause and effect. The higher you are on this scale, the more you are at cause, and the lower you are on the scale, the more you are at effect. So think about this. I do not recommend martyrdom as a way to influence people because you get killed. Okay? Now, what's more effect than that? So when Jesus was nailed to the cross, that's as much effect as you can be. So the opposite extreme is the telepathic person. He can do things by will. He is so causative, he doesn't have to say
Mhm.
anything. And there are people who can do this. And then as you go down, it's less. So the charismatic person is less causative than the telepathic person. The person who operates by reason is less at cause than the charismatic person, and so forth. So it's a scale of cause and effect. So again, when you have a scale, we have to say, what are we measuring? This is
Mhm.
what we're measuring. So there's this thing that, we talk to it as extremes of cause and effect. Again, that's two words, but it's one thing. I'm just giving you what the extremes are so you can see what the axis is.
Yeah.
So, again, sometimes it's not easy to express this in a single word, but it is easy to express in cause and effect. So, like
Exactly. Yeah.
the person who's aloof, well, she's not terribly causative, right? She's a little bit at effect because she's restraining herself. So, that's how this is. It's a gradient.
Yep.
Any questions?
Uh, no, to be honest, everything is pretty straightforward here.